So the recent reveal for Black Ops 7, yeah, it was supposed to be this huge triumphant moment for one of the biggest franchises in gaming. Instead, it just sparked a massive backlash from fans. Something is clearly off, and in this explainer, we're going to dig in and figure out the real root cause of the problem. Okay, let's get into it. And we're not talking about just a handful of grumpy comments online. No, the public reception was, overwhelmingly negative. That's not just noise. That's a huge signal that there's a serious disconnect between the game and its community. So the big question is, why? All right, so here's our game plan. First, we're going to look at this storm of discontent. Then, we'll talk about how a big rival, maybe unintentionally, exposed a much deeper identity crisis. From there, we'll get into the business strategy driving all this and ask the million-dollar question, is Call of Duty just stretching itself way too thin? Okay, first step, a storm of discontent. Because what we're seeing here, it's about so much more than just one bad trailer. This frustration has been simmering for a long, long time. And that's the real heart of the issue, right? The problem isn't something on the outside. It's not about bugs or a missing feature. This is an internal crisis. It's a fundamental change in the very soul and direction of the Call of Duty brand. The game kind of feels like it's forgotten what it even is. Now, a lot of people are pointing fingers at the competition, especially with all the hype around Battlefield 6. But honestly, that's the wrong diagnosis. Battlefield isn't the cause of the problem. It's more like the catalyst that made the problem totally impossible to ignore anymore. Think of it this way. Battlefield's success didn't create COD's problems. It just held up a giant mirror. And that mirror highlighted everything the franchise seems to be missing right now, a clear vision and a confident sense of self. And this really gets to the core of it. On one side, you've got Battlefield 6. It knows exactly what it is, a serious military shooter for fans who want that specific, focused experience. And on the other side, you've got Call of Duty, which has turned into this chaotic, super colorful, hyper-frenetic thing that's desperately trying to be everything to everybody. Which brings us to the main diagnosis, an identity crisis. And we can basically call it the Fortniteification of a military shooter. This idea is right at the heart of all the community's frustration. So what does Fortniteification actually mean? Well, it means Call of Duty has copied Fortnite's incredibly successful business model of doing these huge commercial collaborations. The goal, of course, is to bring in a wider, younger audience. But that comes at a really steep price, watering down the game's original, grounded military theme. And you can really see how this has changed things. The game has gone from a gritty military shooter to what some fans are calling a carnival of colors. I mean, when you're running around in a lobby and you see operators dressed up as characters from American Dad, it just completely changes the vibe of the whole product. It's a strategy designed to chase a younger crowd, but it risks pushing away the original, older player base who fell in love with a completely different kind of game. And look, this isn't just a vibe or a feeling people have. It's a very deliberate business strategy. So let's look at the actual evidence, starting with the most obvious change of all. First up, the skin economy. The entire business model is now built around selling these cosmetic items, which leads to a question a lot of players keep asking. Hey, if people don't like the wacky skins, why not just let us turn them off with a simple filter? It seems like such an easy fix, right? Well, the business logic says otherwise. A skin filter is almost certainly never going to happen, and here's the step-by-step breakdown of why. First, brands pay for visibility. These crossovers are basically paid ads. A filter would reduce that visibility, which defeats the whole point of the brand deal. And second, showing off is what drives sales. People buy cool skins to flex on other players. If those players can just turn them off, well, the main reason to even buy them just vanishes. It would absolutely kill the economic model. But this identity shift isn't just skin deep. The evidence is also baked right into the core gameplay itself, which has been radically changed. The gameplay itself is just becoming more and more hyper-frenetic. You've got these new mechanics like wall jumps and hyper jumps, and the whole game is just speeding away from its more classic, grounded roots. It's now all about speed and chaos, a style that's clearly designed to appeal to a very different type of player than the one who grew up with the original series. And this final piece of evidence, it hits a part of the game that so many longtime fans hold sacred, the single-player campaign. The new campaign, it's designed for 4-player co-op right from the start, with a difficulty that just adapts based on how many people are playing. And what that means is the classic punishing veteran difficulty, it's just gone.
See, when you try to build an experience that works for both one player and a full squad, you risk creating something that isn't perfectly tuned for either, and you end up alienating the hardcore players who loved that tough-as-nails solo challenge. So, where does all this leave us? Well, that brings us to our final section, stretching the rope too far. What is the actual long-term risk of this appeal-to-everyone strategy?
The objective is crystal clear, and from a business point of view, it makes sense. Capture the biggest audience you possibly can. Bring everyone under one giant tent. But this relentless chase for infinite growth has a fundamental and maybe even fatal flaw.
And this quote just perfectly captures the danger. You can keep pulling that rope, stretching your brand to appeal to more and more and more people, but eventually, if you pull it too far, that rope is going to snap.
And the cost, when that rope breaks, is huge. You lose the loyalty of the core community, the people who built your brand in the first place. Your brand identity becomes so watered down it doesn't mean anything anymore. You're choosing short-term profits over long-term health. And eventually, players just get tired of it and move on to something that actually knows what it is.
So to bring it all home, the big problem facing Call of Duty is not Battlefield. It's the franchise's own decision to give up its identity, to trade its soul for the promise of attracting just one more player and one more dollar, which leaves us with one final, pretty critical question. This is the story of a brand that wanted to have the entire world. But in that quest to get every single player on board, has Call of Duty ended up losing itself?